Chris, thank you for joining us. Tom did a great job of giving us some background on the backfill. And one of the reasons we asked you to be here, not only your knowledge of everything, but I understand you were in the legislature in 2018. So maybe you give us a little background.
Well, yeah, I'm happy to do it. And thanks, Art, and thanks for having me. It's good to be here. Certainly happy to lend some of my, background and a few thoughts on this. This is the first time I think I've been on a panel like this with Tom Sands, who I had the honor of serving with in the legislature for 6 years. But I served 12 years in the legislature representing Polk and Dallas County. I served 4 of those years as House Majority Leader, including 2018 when we negotiated the income tax reform bill that laid the foundation for what was done this year. So I was able to be at the table as the different provisions of that bill were being discussed. That was a landmark piece of legislation, and the coming around to what we had to deal with this year was the triggers that were in that bill. And so when we did that bill back in 2018, we wanted to be able to enact rate reductions out in the out years. And the goals when we started out with that was what other states had done, North Carolina and others, where you stair step out the rates over a period of time when you reach certain revenue benchmarks so that you know that you're appropriately and cautiously implementing these tax cuts. As we worked through the process, that series of triggers ended up being one trigger. And, anytime you're working with the legislative process, you have to negotiate, you have to find common ground, and you don't always get everything exactly as you would have wanted it. And that trigger ended up being a one-time trigger, which was as soon as you would reach a top line revenue number of $8.314 billion and 4% revenue growth. But when you hit both of those in a year, you would enact the new rates. And so for the last couple of years, several folks, myself included, wanted to just go ahead and remove the trigger and enact the new rates, that we were close enough to that figure that we felt comfortable that we could go ahead and do it. And then coming around this year, the governor included that in her condition of the state speech at the beginning of the session, and Senate Republicans picked that up and advanced a bill with that in there. So the thinking this year was that we were so close to those revenue benchmarks, really just in light of the whole budget, almost pencil dust, that let's go ahead and remove that and create certainty for the taxpayers that they know what that tax rate's going to be going forward. So, essentially the big piece of that was removing federal deductibility and lowering the rates in a corresponding amount. So our top marginal rate in Iowa drops to 6.5%. We go from 9 brackets to 4, and we now have a little more simplicity in our tax code. And that seems big, and something that Iowans for Tax Relief, which is my new job here, as I think folks have seen looking at that, is that the major decision was made in 2018, and not to necessarily think of this year's bill as a big tax cut. This year was simply providing the predictability that went with a previous tax cut. And so we think what's one of the most exciting things about having these new rates in place is there's now the simplicity and the foundation, and it will make it easier to enact future rate reductions. One of the challenges that we've seen in the past, especially in 2018, is with federal deductibility, that when you move around the rates, you end up with a lot of winners and losers. And when you do an income tax cut, you don't want losers. And so now with one set of rates, you can simply stair step those down, and we just have winners. So that's that in a nutshell. We are very appreciative of the leadership of the governor, Senate Republicans, to advance both the removal of the triggers and the inheritance tax this year, and excited that the governor has already indicated that she wants to continue working on future rate reductions. So I think it's a lot of very positive progress, and presents a tremendous opportunity for the future for Iowa taxpayers.
Chris, let's go back to 2018 again.
Yeah.
My understanding was that in addition to the triggers, that was really a landmark bill, and it put us as a state really parallel to what changes had been done at the federal level. Am I correct in that regard as well?
Yeah. Well, there's so many provisions in that 2018 bill. We were one of just a few states that still had federal deductibility. In fact, I think now the last one has now joined us, so all 50 states have that. But the piece that made that possible was the sales tax modernization work that we did back in 2018 as well for digital goods, digital subscription services, online purchases. Before 2018, those were all exempt from sales tax. A lot of Main Street retailers in Iowa at a disadvantage to the Amazons of the world. And so it was really just a matter of fairness. Plus, as more and more people move their consumption to online shopping, digital services, is that we needed to be able to continue to tax that. It's just a matter of equity. So that was a very big piece of that bill. And I don't know if that answers your question directly, but yeah,
Yes.
that and the new revenue that came in off of that was the foundation for being able to do the other tax changes.
Goodness, and there was no ability at the time to understand that we were going to hit a pandemic.
Right.
Essentially, it was going to make everything go online. Boy, the revenue that could have been lost was significant.
Right. And if the legislature was trying to make those changes now in a pandemic or post-pandemic environment, I think they would have been even more politically difficult to achieve.
I understood there was something that was referred to as rolling. This is kind of the 2018 bill rolls with federal changes. Can you explain that a little?
Yeah, these are the ones where I try to defer to Tom, but I'll take a stab at it. The legislature would come in every year and do a coupling bill for the various provisions, tax extenders in the federal income tax code, and they would change at times, and it would always present some difficulty for Iowa tax preparers to know what the rules of the game were, especially if the legislature would delay those until later in the session. And so that rolling conformity just says that we will mirror those federal tax extenders every year automatically, so that our tax preparer community and taxpayers know what that obligation will be right away on the front end. And it's not on everything. There's a few exclusions to that, but by and large, that's what that is about. Again, it's about predictability for taxpayers, so they know what their bill is going to be, or at least what the obligations are, and they can plan accordingly.
Well, that's very helpful. So the triggers were accelerated by basically a year. The new tax rates, which we've asked John to go into next, will go into effect January 1 of 23.
That's right.
And that's been very helpful.
Yeah, well, we're excited about all of that. So John, again, like Tom and John are both my experts, so I'll let them take it away and provide a whole lot more meaningful information on that rather than just color commentary.
You've done a great job. Chris, I'd be interested, a year ago, the governor proposed a 1 cent sales tax. And part of that, 3/5, I think, was going to go to the mandated environmental fund. Another portion was going to go to the mental health and disability funding, taking that off the rolls. We discussed that, and take it off the property tax rolls, give it to the state. But what's your, and then the other cents, fifths of a cents, we're going to go to reduction in property taxes. Having been on the Hill, what's your feeling about the appetite for the legislature to do anything that grand in an election year?
I think there actually will be some interest in what does the next tax bill look like. I think if nothing else, the governor's leadership on that will make it an issue. Clearly, Majority Leader Whitver has made some indications that he's very interested in continuing the conversation. So those are going to be obviously two important voices on that. Anything that the governor would come up with would obviously have to be different because that mental health component has changed with the state picking up the obligation for that and putting additional resources into the system, which was part of the premise of the Invest in Iowa Act. But that having been said, that enacting that Natural Resources Trust Fund is of a lot of interest to a lot of Iowans, and getting some dollars into that system, and that formula for how they're distributed would probably need a change, but and then taking the remainder and putting that into other rate reductions or whatever that would be. I think, at least from, and this is my own opinion now, and not necessarily what the legislature would do, but I do think it's shared by a lot of legislators, is they don't want to enact something they see as a tax increase by triggering a new 1 cent sales tax. If the corresponding rate reductions are a net benefit for taxpayers, so that then I think that gets very interesting for Republican legislators to take a look at. So, and that might not be in year one, but let's, for example, if in the out years there's future rate reductions that start with a decision today, that might be the kind of package that could get some traction at the Capitol. But one thing I have learned up there is the complexity makes things difficult to figure out where everyone is at. And typically those decisions are made late, and it's probably wait and see is usually the best approach on trying to figure that out. And I also know that often when I try and make predictions about the Capitol, I'm proven wrong. So I did try to steer away from them.
Well, and I probably shouldn't given you that much rope, but none of us have a crystal ball.
Yeah.
But it is interesting how the backfill basically was something that had been established, been put into place now. It does. It started out to relieve property taxes. The triggers have been met. We're going to have new income tax calculations. The inheritance tax is gone away, and the mental health funding. This was a pretty omnibus bill. Any overarching opinions, observations with respect to Senate File 619?
I feel I have better feelings about certain provisions than others in that bill, but that's with anything that large. I do think it was a significant step towards removing some obligations, truing up our tax obligations, removing the inheritance tax altogether, removing the county mental health levy, and shifting those things to state obligations. Just it's a simplicity matter. It makes it easier for policymakers to make decisions in the future. So I think all of those sort of broad brushstroke items were very positive progress this year, and I think will be a key turning point as we continue to talk about these things in the future.
I appreciate those observations. Thank you.